bit of what they call an audible here. After the turmoil that set into the markets last week, though I'd been preparing this talk on the particular title that was listed before, I decided to simply change gears and talk about the state of the blockchain world in general. Now, for those of you that are not familiar, I apologize, but for those that are not familiar, fundamentally the work on the blockchain was actually done pre-Bitcoin. And while that's not a widely recognized fact, it's nevertheless true, and perhaps the simplest evidence is to see that in Satoshi's white paper, which has 8 footnotes, 4 of the footnotes are to the work that was done by Dr. Haber and myself at part of the old Bell Labs system, fully 15 years prior to the emergence of Bitcoin. People are also not aware, typically, of the fact that, let's see, how do I make this move to the next slide? Am I supposed to point it? That there's been a blockchain in operation in complete public view since the middle of the 1990s, which continues to function just fine. And so it's a little bit from that perspective that I'd like to take a deep breath and talk about what's going on in this space right now, given the events of the last couple of weeks. I'm going to skip a couple of things because I want to just focus in on a main message. But I should also note that besides that historical legacy, I am an active investor in the blockchain space. Yugen Partners is a scout fund for Morgan Creek Digital, which is part of a family of funds that invest very large sums of money into this and allied spaces. And so from that perspective of someone that has been working in the blockchain space since well before Bitcoin emerged, and from the perspective of an active investor today, I just want to level set expectations, or at least my view of what's actually going on. So 7 questions. Everyone takes it for granted that we're in some sort of bear market now in the crypto world, and we're waiting for Bitcoin to recover. It's not clear to me that Bitcoin at this point needs to recover, or what the thinking is there. And rather than be thought heretical, I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that the spectacular growth in assigned value for a single Bitcoin is obviously due to the interest in the general space of being able to create currencies and all sorts of operations in a manner that's completely separate and distinct from existing fiat currencies. But it's also been at a time when there's been an enormous amount of capital looking for places to go. And that situation is changing. And so to think that past is predictor of future and it's simply a matter of time before we get back to Bitcoin 65K or 69K or whatever, I really think that thesis should be questioned. It's certainly questioned by us in our investment decisions. But to me, that's not necessarily a bad news story. The real point I'm trying to drive home is that the space is maturing to a point where obviously it would be not a happy day if the price of Bitcoin continued to go down. But the blockchain space can survive well past Bitcoin. Its foundations are more fundamental than the particular work of art, if you will, a work of genius that Satoshi created. And I think it's worth resetting expectations to say, do you have a successful strategy for moving forward that doesn't require Bitcoin to, to change its value at all over the next 10 years? Because I think we're starting to see, in a minor way, at the indicators level, but I think in a much more major way as I look at the new startups that we're investing in and the growth of the infrastructure, there's sort of a decoupling that's beginning. And so the blockchain can move on and prosper without it having to be fully in lockstep with Bitcoin. I'm not suggesting that means that as Bitcoin goes down, that the market in general suffers and whatnot, but a decoupling is already begun, and I can't think of anything more significant to highlight it than just to note the move from Ethereum over to proof of stake. As originally conceived, the blockchain did not require proof of work, and of course, even a Bitcoin maximalist needs to acknowledge that Bitcoin as conceived is moving to a point, maybe not next year, obviously, because of the way mining works, but where there will be no mining left to do. And so it's worth taking a deep breath and saying, that's going to be okay. Maybe not for your buying an island near the Bahamas plans or whatnot, but blockchain can very much survive. What about the FTX collapse? What is the lesson there? Well, I think there's a lesson there about the power of idealism and the limits of idealism. Because I'm not a cynic about the space. I'm thrilled to see it continue to grow and mature. But what we have in the FTX case, for all of the discussion we've had about how transparency is important, is a complete lack of transparency in what's been allowed to operate. And you might ask, well, how is that possible? Well, it's because there's a collision between the ideals of what the blockchain can accomplish, something that I'm fervently in favor of, and how it actually ends up getting used in the, quote, real world. And for whatever reason, for whatever combination of economic incentives, there are people that were more than happy to put billions and billions of dollars, including some of my so-called smart money colleagues that invested in FTX, in something that lacked the very basic premise of the blockchain space, the notion of being decentralized, the notion of being transparent. And yet those micro decisions were made by individuals that were fully aware of what they were and were not getting involved with, I think. So the ideals of blockchain do allow for a long-term win. It's not a stoppable force, okay? But that does not constrain the space and where people choose to place money or not, that everyone has to abide by the ideals. You can do whatever you want with the technology. And I don't even need to go into whether it's a corrupting or non-corrupting use of the technology. It is what it is. We hold certain ideals in our investment thesis that we're looking for things that actually create value in the world, but it doesn't require everyone else to follow those rules as demonstrated. I think it's also time to declare that permission blockchains, which in the initial irrational or otherwise exuberance were thought to be an equally important player with so-called permissionless blockchains, I don't think that's borne out. It's simply not going to go that way. And I think it goes to the heart of where value creation is in the blockchain world. And there's an old saying that comes out of the New Testament of the Bible about the need to not put new wine into old wineskins. because new wine is still fermenting, and it will make the old wineskins that have lost their ability to stretch to explode. Okay? And the relevance here is that so much of the effort in this space about traditional enterprises, traditional corporate structures profiting from the blockchain are simply trying to put new wine into old wineskins. The point about the blockchain is that it allows a new kind of social structure, new sets of social structures that over time, and I don't speak this like a anarchist, but over time are simply going to disrupt all of these industries. Maybe not as fast, as I said, as your retirement account would like them to, but as an economist I was speaking with on a panel last week, said the genie is out of the bottle. The fundamental reason why value can be created here as the transactions become frictionless and the registration of asset and its ability to move from person to person becomes fully transparent. The asymptotic end game is clear and hasn't changed a bit. Truly, the genie is out of the bottle. But attempts to put square pegs in round holes are not yielding the results that so many had expected. Predictions about how it's going to revolutionize healthcare, how it's going to revolutionize real estate, just to pick two very traditional fields. It will happen eventually. Okay, but as far as I can tell, it will come kicking and screaming. So why am I still smiling? Well, it's because when you give it a greenfield opportunity, it becomes the more natural structure on which to build new enterprises and more broadly new social organizations. Of that, there's really little doubt. And so just to pick at random an opportunity that is so-called greenfield, I think many people are probably familiar with that phrase, rather than having to refit into an existing industry, they need the opportunity to build something brand new. I mentor a lot of companies and hear a lot of pitches, and just to pick an example almost at random, there's a company that is now trying to take advantage or create some value with the enormous explosion in the number of, explosion perhaps is a poor word here, in the number of satellites orbiting the Earth, which, you know, over the course of the next 5 years is growing from thousands to tens of thousands and could easily get into the hundreds of thousands. There's a need to have a level playing field, transparent registry of where all those satellites are headed at any particular time, who owns them, who's responsible for moving which satellite if two satellites look like they're on a collision course. This is such a natural example of how blockchain provides superior technology in a greenfield application. And so much of the focus really at this point now needs to shift to creating these new industries really out from scratch. I know there's quite a bit of discussion in the non-believing world about blockchain, about how ephemeral NFTs are, but quite frankly, the NFTs in the metaverse are a perfect example of that greenfield creation that simply has a fundamentally better structure. And if you don't, and I'm minding my time, if you don't think the metaverse is real, just try going to in the United States at least, try going to a college football game where it's cold and the food is expensive and you can't see very well, and they pause the game for 3 minutes at a time just so there can be a commercial advertiser break. You realize that the game is actually taking place in the metaverse, everybody's TV screens. It's not really taking place in the real world anymore. So we've been in the metaverse for a while, and when people and money move into a particular space, whether real or virtual, that's the new real world. I want to close by just saying that and 10 seconds is not enough time to say it. There's an enormous opportunity in flipping the discussion about privacy over to switching it to self-sovereign identity and the power that individuals will gain as more of their information under their control becomes publicly available. So I'm just going to stop on that because I'm 12 seconds over. I know you came to hear about development in different countries, but I felt it was appropriate to speak my piece given all the disruption that we're seeing right now. Thanks.